So, because it was pretty clear from day one that Derwood was selling an agenda and not being truthful, I really have not paid a lot of attention to his statements. Yesterday, I did a video highlighting the fact that the RCMP think he's a joke also, and showing that basically they did haul him in for questioning, sat him on his ass, and I pointed out that the very next day was when this Natasha Haywood contacted the RCMP with a story that was pretty much identical to Derwood's story. Coincidence? It seems highly unlikely. Now, because I wasn't paying a great deal of attention to the things that Derwood was saying, because he is a bit of a dingbat, I didn't notice some of the major red flags. But when I was working on yesterday's video, I was like, well, what is this guy's motive? And I'm still unsure as to whether he is protecting a family member and Daniel, or if he is just coming out and being Daniel's spin doctor, essentially. But from going through the transcript of a 3+ hour video that I put together that I haven't bothered publishing, it became clear pretty quickly that Dingbat's number one goal was to basically stand up for Daniel, deflect all the attention away from Daniel towards Malaya, and try and convince people that Daniel was innocent. Of course, all you need is a basic knowledge of statement analysis to actually realise that Dingbat is lying every time he opens his mouth, pretty much. But not only does he give himself away a few times with his lies, there's also some leakage that happens. So in this video, I want to examine whether or not Dingbat actually knows exactly what happened to the children. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to go back over some things that we discovered with relation to Janie's narratives, Daniel's narratives, and Malaya's narrative. Alongside those, I want to look at some statements that have been made by Derwood relating to Daniel's innocence or lack thereof. And then at the end, there's a particular statement that I picked up on from Derwood that I want to discuss with you, because I think this will show us if he actually knows exactly what happened to Lily and Jack. Now, in the video that I did yesterday, I pointed out that it seems pretty clear that what Dingbat is doing here is pushing a story for the benefit of Daniel. In fact, one of the quotes I played was him saying that he was doing this for Daniel. What I found interesting today when I was going through looking for clips, because, like I said, the video that I use is over 3 hours long. So in order to find the clips that I was looking for, I just typed in Daniel. And that brought up 311 times Derwood mentioned Daniel in that 3+ hours of audio. So I was curious and I typed in Lily. It came up 17 times. Same with Jack, 17 times. Even Malaya only came up 243 times. So in all his tour of YouTube, Derwood was speaking about Daniel far more than he was speaking about Lily and Jack, and in fact more than he was speaking about Malaya. Now, in this video, I'm going to reference a number of my previous videos. So I will actually add links for all those videos in the description section for this one, so that you can go and listen to them if you've not done so already. Because there's a lot of key things that I've mentioned in those videos that I will mostly be just referring to today. So those things that I've discussed at length in other videos, I'm not going to do the deep dive that I would normally do. So if you want that deep dive, then check out the playlist that I will add to the description and check out those videos, and they deep dive into all the things that I covered today in this video. Now, Derwood fancies himself as a bit of a salesman, but the reality is that at the end of the day, his language gives him away pretty much every time. And that's something you are going to see over and over again in this video. So with that said, let's jump in and let's start listening to some of Derwood's audio.
If Daniel was guilty of and being involved in the disappearance of these kids, the kids would have definitely been dead. No two ways about it. If Daniel was guilty of that, they would definitely be dead. If Daniel was innocent of that, and I'm only talking about the removal of the kids, I'm not talking about their life together, I'm only talking about direct involvement with the disappearance of the kids, then I knew the kids were going to be alive.
I wanted to start with that audio again. If you listened to my video yesterday, I played that in yesterday's video. It is one of the most illogical things I've heard someone say. In his mind, he thinks he's telling people Daniel's not involved because he has been so very adamant in his insistence that Lily and Jack are alive. So he's saying, if Daniel was involved, then you can be certain that Lily and Jack would actually have been deceased. What he's trying to convey here is, because he's told you that Lily and Jack are alive, that means Daniel can't be involved. The thing is, it's the classic Derwood thing of stacking statements. He gives you one statement that is a complete fabrication. He expects you to take that as being a solid truth, and then he stacks another statement on that, which he thinks that he's saying, well, the first statement I told you is truthful, so the follow-up statement, because it is basically based on the truth of the first statement, has to be truthful itself. It's totally illogical. It's like me telling you the sky is green, and because we know the sky is green, we're not going to see that tree over the road because it's the same colour as the sky. But I think in his head he also thinks it goes two ways. So he's saying because Daniel's not involved, that means the children have to be alive. The children are alive because Daniel's not involved, but also because Daniel's not involved, that means the children are alive. It's just, it makes no sense what he's saying here. But it's leakage, if you ask me. It's him basically saying that, yes, Daniel is capable of being responsible for these children not being alive. Or essentially, if anybody is responsible for these children not being alive, it would have to be Daniel. So there's some major leakage here. There's a little bit of truth leaking out in this totally illogical statement that he's trying to make.
Like Daniel was scared too at the start of this, man. He was spitting and sputtering and crying. He didn't know what the Christ to do. And I don't know how I got lucky enough for him to trust me, because I got two young fellas. One fella spoke the same, and him and Daniel are friends. Matter of fact, they spent a little time together this evening.
Again, if you ask me, there is some seriously leaked truth here. He's saying that at the start of all this, Daniel was scared, witless. He didn't say witless. I edited out what he said because I don't want this video demonetised. But he was scared witless at the start of this. He was spitting and spluttering and crying and didn't know what to do. What he's describing here is not the reaction of someone who has missing children and who is going into emergency mode, who is still basically running through the woods ahead of the helicopters and running through waist-deep water and just doing everything in his power. No, what he is depicting here is someone who is in deep trouble. Someone who's made a really, really bad mistake and now they're afraid of the consequences of that mistake. If we look at the two scenarios that are not the real ones, the first one being that the children wandered off into the woods, the second one being Derwood's story of Malaya putting them in a car, the reaction that he is describing does not apply to either of them. Like I said, if the children had wandered off into the woods, then we get the reaction that Daniel described. Jumping to action and just basically going into fix-it mode, going all out to try and find them, running through waist-deep water, running ahead of the helicopters, Superman Dan. If it's the scenario of, oh, Malaya put the children in a car and they were whisked away and hidden, again, he's not going to be scared witless. That just does not apply. Spitting and spluttering and crying? No. You would turn around, especially if you were being grilled. He got questioned by the RCMP something like 4 or 5 times in the first week. They hold him in for a polygraph. Now, he claims that he volunteered to do that and that they got these polygraph guys in at Daniel's request. We know that's BS. Now, if there was any truth whatsoever, we have seen how hard he has tried in the last month or so to throw Malaya under the bus. So if there was any truth in this story, you can bet that he wouldn't be scared witless. He wouldn't be not knowing what to do. He would be going into his buddies at the RCMP and saying, here's the deal, this is what's going on. So what Derwood is describing here does not fit either of those scenarios. The only scenario it actually fits is someone who has done something really, really wrong and they are afraid of facing the consequences and they don't know how to get out of it. And Derwood is telling us that's the situation Daniel was in and, well, you know, I've stepped in to fix the problem. So the problem this guy has is that he's actually not all that bright. So his attempt to come up with stories to sell this narrative of Malaya putting the children in a car falls flat because he's actually thinking about the reality of what happened. So his descriptions actually point to Daniel having done something. They don't point to Malaya having put the children in a car.
I think the RCMP are centered on one person, and they're so. I think they're centered on the wrong person, and they need 2 bodies to charge this person, and they can't find 2 bodies.
Again, he thinks he's being clever and that he's defending Daniel, and he's saying, well, the RCMP are looking at him for some reason with no logic behind it, but they can't charge him because they don't have 2 bodies. And the way he says that just makes my blood boil because he's just so matter of fact. He really doesn't give a damn about these 2 kids. But what he's trying to say here is that they can only possibly charge him if they find Lily and Jack, and they can't find them. So that means, in his head, that means that's because they've been hidden away somewhere on a reservation or something like that. But what he is actually showing us here is that RCMP have enough of a reason to be building a case against Daniel. And in his mind, in Derwood's mind, they can't arrest him until they find Lily and Jack's remains. This is very similar to Daniel with his statement of saying that he is 100% certain that the dogs wouldn't find anything when they searched the property. Essentially, what Derwood has done here is been like, yeah, the evidence against him is that it's stacking up, but they're not going to be able to arrest him because, you know, it's a no-body case. Well, guess what, Derwood? The number of no-body cases that are successfully prosecuted is considerable. These days, with the advances in forensics, you can create a solid no-body case based on forensics, based on statements. Yes, after the whole Barry Morphew fiasco, law enforcement, I believe, prefer to take longer and make sure that they have a really rock-solid case before making arrests. But it will happen. So Derwood is trying to say here, like, oh, because they can't find the bodies, then, you know, that proves that Daniel is innocent. But what he forgets that he's done here is that he's gone, they are looking at him really, really hard because he looks guilty as. So he's slipped up. There's a bit of leakage here.
So initially, I never knew it was Patty's kids and Malaya's kids. I heard that there was a guy named Daniel that was supposed to have killed his 2 kids.
Okay, lots of red flags with this statement. First of all, we know when you listen to Jordan's interview that he did with, I think it was with the Turkey guy, I can't remember, but in his interview, he tried a few times to say that he hadn't seen Daniel at all since the children went missing. But he slipped up and he essentially said that he'd seen Daniel straight after the children went missing and that he'd said to Daniel, I know you didn't do this. What Dingbat is trying to do here is create separation from him being involved in this. I knew nothing about it for weeks. I didn't know this was Daniel and his family. And he's like, and I heard that there's this guy called Daniel who was supposed to have killed his kids. Problem with that is that Daniel was doing a major media tour at the beginning. And at the beginning, when he was doing that major media tour, he was putting on that front of the caring stepfather who was so distraught, doing the fake crying through his hand and then peeking through his fingers to make sure that his audience was buying it. Now, I will admit, from the moment I saw the first interview with Daniel, the one where he was doing the fake tears and peering through his hands, I knew this guy did it. This guy's responsible. But what I was seeing online, and especially on Facebook, was there were a lot of locals who were jumping on any YouTube creators who said, there's red flags here with this guy. And these people were going, how dare you say that? He's the one who's searching for the children. Look at their mother, she left. And honestly, to date, I don't think I've heard any YouTube creators come out and just say flat out that they believed that Daniel had K'd these children. At the beginning, everyone was very cautious. And basically, we were all saying, this does not look right. That's as far as we were going. We were pointing out the inconsistencies in the statements. I was pointing out the micro expressions. I was pointing out the things in his language and the things like the peering through the hands while he was pretending to cry. But it wasn't a popular opinion that was being put out there by locals. We had the media pushing these children have wandered away into the woods and got lost. We had Daniel and Malaya, as soon as they realised that the attention was on them from the RCMP, suddenly pushing the abduction narrative. So for Derwood to be saying that the first thing he heard was about this Daniel guy who had apparently K'd his kids, that's BS. That's leakage again. Because the first thing he would have heard would have been about these children being missing. And in fact, he would have got one of those non-intrusive alerts on May the 2nd and another one on May the 3rd. What he's done here is he's tried to go for the shock factor to basically show this is the horrible things that people were saying that aren't true. But he's basically got it all wrong because that's not what the narrative was in the beginning. So he's essentially admitted that he knew from the beginning what had happened. He's basically dobbed Daniel in. And let's be real, Derwood has made it really clear how well he knows Daniel, because Daniel used to go to his place after work every day with Jordan. And we've had Jordan saying that he contacted Daniel on day one and said, I know you didn't do this. So are you honestly going to tell me that Jordan didn't contact Dingbat on the 2nd of May and say, hey, Daniel's kids have gone missing? Or maybe Jordan contacted Dingbat on the 2nd of May and said, Daniel K'd his children and he needs help. I don't actually think that Jordan would have asked his father to help, because you've seen his reaction. He's not happy with the fact that Derwood shoved his nose in it in terms of going on all this social media. So I would imagine that what has happened here is that Jordan has said to his father, this is what happened. And Dingbat has just gone, I'm going to involve myself and I'm going to step in and try and fix this for Daniel. And all he's done is made himself look like a clown, and he's basically helping Daniel dig a deeper hole for himself. But you'll notice the focus of all these statements that he is saying all go back to Daniel being responsible for the children not being alive. It all goes back to one single thing. And he's working very hard to defend that one possibility.
True, Daniel's a pretty damn good fella. He's not a bad young fella at all. He's got his problems, same as all of us, but he's no killer. So as I dug into this at about the 3.5 week mark, I started finding, no, this guy's no killer.
He's really overselling it here. Now, if I were to play more of the audio around this particular time, he was also claiming that Daniel's never done any rugs in his life. The worst he's ever done is maybe have a few drinks. He's a good guy. He never does anything bad. He's overselling it. He's basically saying things about Daniel that aren't true. He's the one that has turned around and said, Paddy wanted me to look into him because he was hurting the children. He's the one who said, yeah, so he was smacking them, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Yeah, things weren't so great in the house, but it's not my business to interfere when it's happening in the home. His children, he can do what he likes. He's essentially saying all these things. So this statement here, where he's trying to sell this notion of Daniel being someone utterly saintly, is a complete utter joke. Because he has already shown that's not the case. We know that's not the case. But he also has to repeat himself when he says that Daniel's not a carer. When someone has to keep repeating that statement that they are telling you, and they've not really given any substantial reason for why they are pushing that onto you, then you've got to question what they're doing here. Why are they trying so hard to convince you of this fact without presenting anything really tangible? Oh, he's a nice guy and he's always been respectful towards me. Well, there's a lot of guys who come across as nice guys, and then you find out what they do in their home when no one is looking. He's presented a statement with no substance whatsoever and just expects people to believe him. And let me just point out here how much of a charmer Ted Bundy was, from all accounts.
And I'm going to tell you, Malaya, I don't think you'll find anywhere. Malaya said she thought Daniel might be hurting the kids, but nowhere will you find Malaya say that Daniel was capable or did kill the kids.
Now, first of all, let's talk about what he's doing here in terms of Malaya, because this is a strategy that he's used a number of times, not just with Malaya even, but with other people who he knows aren't going to come out publicly and speak. So he knows that Malaya's gone to ground. He knows that she's not going to come out on social media and contradict anything he says. There's another instance where he makes this really bold claim and he says, I'm pretty sure that's right. Malaya could come out and tell you if it's otherwise, but I'm pretty certain that she won't. And he's not saying she won't come out because I'm right. He's essentially saying he knows that he can say whatever he likes because she's not going to come out and say, yeah, the guy's lying. So that's the first thing we're getting here. He's making a statement that Malaya has said this thing and she's not going to say this thing, and I know it for certain. He knows that she's not going to say any of these things because she's not going to come out publicly and say anything. But there's more to it than that. So he says, Malaya said that he might have, and then he corrects himself. He might have been hurting the children. So he has essentially said here that it sounds like Malaya might have actually said something to Paddy along the lines of, it's possible that Daniel might have hurt the children, which is probably as close to the truth as she could get without actually admitting any culpability herself. And it seems like Derwood has picked up on that. Or it could just be that he knows that Daniel was violent with the children. So he knows that Patty said to him, Malaya has said Daniel's been doing these things. So he's acting on that he's going that extra step because he knows that Malaya's not going to come out publicly and say anything. And he says, I don't think you'll find anywhere, and he goes on to basically say he doesn't think you're going to find anywhere that Malaya has ever said that he was capable of making the children not alive, or that he had made the children not alive. Now, he can confidently make that statement because he knows that Malaya is not going to come out publicly and say, well, actually, he did this. He knows this for two reasons. One, as I've already mentioned, Malaya went to ground. So he knew that she wasn't going to come out publicly and say anything. But not only that, Malaya and Daniel were giving the same story at the beginning. Their stories were, while they were contradictory as well, they had created their narrative together, and it was so clear that they had done that. So Derwood was aware of that. So he would know that for Malaya to come out and say Daniel did this, that she would basically be throwing herself under the bus too, because she would be admitting that she allowed it to happen, or that she helped cover up a crime. He knows that Malaya cannot come out and publicly accuse Daniel. All she can do is do a deal behind closed doors with the RCMP, which nobody will find out about, where she basically tells them what happened, and they say, okay, well, you're not going to go to prison now. So he knows full well that because Malaya has guilty knowledge, at the very least, that no, she's not going to come out publicly and accuse Daniel. So he can make this statement. But he's also using this classic persuasive technique of, well, you know, he's capable of this bad thing. So because I'm admitting that he's capable of this bad thing, you have to believe me when I say that he's not capable of this worse thing. We're supposed to buy the idea that since Derwood is willing to expose Daniel here for hurting the children, that if Daniel had been responsible for the children not being alive, that Derwood would also do that. Honestly, the repertoire that this guy has in terms of ways of being dishonest says to me that this is what he has done his entire life. This is how this guy functions. It's like breathing for him. It just comes naturally.
Oh, there was somebody else. I got a good source there that backed up what Daniel was saying in the driveway.
Dingbat is really good at coming up with receipts without actually providing those receipts. I have a really good source. The fact that he has to tell you that this source is a really good source, he is overselling it, which straight up shows you this is just a load of BS. Shows you he has no source whatsoever. But in actual fact, the reason why I played that brief clip there has got nothing to do with him and his quoting his sources and his receipts that aren't really receipts, and everything to do with the fact that he's claiming that this good source that he has backed up everything that Daniel was saying in the driveway. This to me is actually major leakage. He's talking about Daniel saying something in the driveway. He doesn't clarify what driveway he's talking about. And this straight away makes me sit up and pay attention, because it seems that so many things point towards whatever happened to Lily and Jack having happened in the driveway. And now he's saying that he has this good source that backed up what Daniel was saying in the driveway. Is he saying that he was on site after whatever happened to Lily and Jack? Did he help with the cover-up? Maybe there's an innocent explanation for this. But the thing is, this guy over-explains everything. And yet he talks about Daniel saying something in the driveway, And he offers no clarification, no explanation whatsoever. I think this is leakage. And I'm wondering if this ties in with his statement about Daniel at the very beginning being scared senseless and spluttering and crying and all these things and being absolutely terrified. I mean, at the end of the day, the way Logan has involved herself, the way she has said certain things, certainly makes me think that she knows what happened here and that she has helped with the cover-up. So if there is any truth in this rumour that Derwood was actually going out with Logan's mother at the time that all this happened, then it is quite possible that he could have been one of the first people on scene straight after whatever happened occurred. It is quite possible that he does know exactly what happened to Lily and Jack. And no, I'm not talking about them being hidden on a reserve somewhere.
Right to the Janie even grabbed me and took me for the tour. She showed me exactly where they come out of the house, exactly why the boot print was there, exactly where they went to the driveway, exactly where Malaya was parking, sitting on her butt in the grass by the wood pile for a little while, like right down to the T.
Okay, I didn't actually realise this when I was collecting the clips for the video. But has Derwood just told us that the children didn't go out through the sliding door, but they went out through the front door? All this insistence over they couldn't have got out the front door because it was locked, because there was a wrench in it, because there was something else in it. They couldn't figure out a consistent explanation for how this front door was immobilised, how the children couldn't have got out the front door. And we've been focusing on how they were over-exaggerating in terms of just going overboard with the explanation of we can't hear them when they go out that sliding door because it's silent. They don't always shut that sliding door, but this time it was closed. Derwood has just said that Janie showed him all these things. He's like, where they came out of the house, exactly why the boot print was there, exactly where they went to the driveway. And then he says, and exactly where Malaya was sitting by the woodpile for a little while. That woodpile was nowhere near the backyard. Why would Malaya be sitting there? Unless whatever occurred happened out there in the driveway, in front of the house. And here's the thing. That location by the woodpile is also the location where all the cars park. Is he telling us here that actually someone did hit the children with a car? The children were run over in the driveway by the woodpile, and Malaya was so distraught she was sitting on the ground. Because what he's telling us here ties in with what Janie has told us, except that it moves everything to in front of the house instead of behind the house. It moves everything into a location where, yes, there probably would be a considerable risk of these children being hit by a car or run over by a car because they were in an area where they probably should not have been. I'm thinking probably that they may not have got out that front door because we hear from Janie, Malaya and Daniel about them going through the fence. But maybe the whole point of trying to make it clear that the front door was locked was to basically avoid pointing out that the children had gotten out of the yard and were right up in front of the house by the woodpile. So for me, I think when I look at the statements that have been made, I think perhaps that the argument of they couldn't get through the front door was not so much to hide the fact that they got through the front door, but probably more so to hide the fact that they had gotten right out in front of the house there, potentially. I do want to point out, however, that when we saw the CBC footage, that footage first appeared on the 16th of May, and that is the first drone footage of the property since we saw this. And in that footage, the woodpile had been moved up to where the swings were. Now, there's no grass there. Malaya would not have been sitting on the grass there. So I don't think he's referring to the woodpile when it was there. Especially because I gather that it was eventually moved into the shed. But there isn't a spot there where Malaya would have been sitting on the ground, not on the grass. So if there's any truth in what Derwood is saying here, that Janie showed him the location by the woodpile on the grass where Malaya was sitting for a while, that means that he was there in the early days. He claims that he didn't really become involved for quite some time. But if he was there and he knows where this woodpile was that he's referring to, and that Malaya was sitting on the grass, like I said, there's no grass near the other location where the woodpile was moved to, so he has to be referring to at the front of the property here. So he's told us that he's been involved within the first 2 weeks. But at the same time, it also seems like an admission that he's saying Janie has told him exactly what happened. She's walked him through. Because he says exactly why the boot print was there. Not where the boot print was, but exactly why it was there. Well, it was there to create a narrative. Because I believe that if it was a one single boot print, then it was put there afterwards. But at the very least, he's telling us that he is involved enough to have been on the property. We know that anyway because when Janie did her interview, guess who we saw in the background walking away down the driveway? Now, I'm going to play some of Janie's audio, and then I'm going to explain some of the things that I discussed in yesterday's video. I don't think it's necessary for me to go through all that audio again, because otherwise I would just be reinventing the wheel. So I'll make sure that that video is linked so you can go and watch that. But I will explain some of the elements of that and some of the elements of some of my previous videos, specifically the ones where I'm talking about Janie and the driveway. But first of all, let's listen to some of Janie's audio.
Here is what happened at the end of my driveway, the altercation. My brother, me and Justin were out on the four-wheeler. We were up at the pipeline. We were coming out at the road called the Matheson Road. Malaya called me on my phone. She called me at 3:32. I didn't answer because we were talking to a lady on her four-wheeler with a child. Then she called me back at 5:39. I answered the phone. She told me to get back here to the trailer. I said, "What's up?" She said, "I can't tell you over the phone." So I came back here. Me and Justin came back here to the trailer. Malaya was standing on the edge of the driveway, crying her eyes out. I went up and I put my arms around her and said, "Please don't tell me that they found the kids dead." Hey.
Now, I pointed this out several weeks ago in one of my videos. And what's going on here is that Janie is describing the altercation at the end of the driveway. But what she says here is that when she got there, Malaya was standing on the edge of the driveway. So Malaya wasn't at the end of the driveway where the altercation occurred. She's describing a moment in time when Malaya was standing on the edge of the driveway and Malaya was in tears, and Janie's first reaction was, "Don't tell me the children are not alive." Now, Janie has told us that she's not seen any tears from Malaya since those children allegedly went missing. And something that I pointed out many, many months ago was all Janie's narratives blend together and they all happen in one location on the driveway. And what she has done here, she's trying to describe the altercation at the end of the driveway, but she's placed Malaya back in the same location on the driveway where every other event has occurred. It's like there's a magnet in that one spot on the driveway. And Malaya stands there with Meadow. Janie rakes the gravel. The boot print is found. The children get out onto the driveway and Janie points to that location. And now the altercation at the end of the driveway, suddenly Malaya is somehow involved in that altercation, but she's not at the end of the driveway, she's actually on the edge of the driveway, which to me sounds like she's placing her back in the same location that everything else occurred. To me, it makes me wonder if what she is doing here is once again tangling her narratives, and what she is describing here is the moment after something happened to Lily and Jack. And Janie came out of her RV and saw Malaya there on the edge of the driveway.
I came out of the trailer. Jack was sitting beside the little playhouse digging worms with Lily. Jack said, "Granny, I found a worm. Found a centipede." I said, "Good boy. You keep looking." I went over and I started raking in front of my RV where I found Malaya standing.
This is a classic example of Janie's timeline all basically being in one location and getting all tangled up. Because the way she's saying it, she's talking about Thursday afternoon. Now, she has the kids in exactly the same location as where she has them on Friday morning. And same again, it's like they briefly appear and then Janie's doing her own thing. This time, she's gone to rake the driveway in the location where Malaya was standing. It makes it sound like that happened at the same time. Malaya was out there standing on the driveway, Janie went and raked it over. And you see when Janie does her interview with Ali from CBC, she's giving this same narrative, and Ali actually has to pause her and ask her to clarify which time she's talking about, because clearly she picked up on the same thing with Janie talking about the driveway, raking the driveway and where Malaya was standing. She did exactly the same thing with her CBC interview.
Everything I'm telling you is what's on my interview. Only I am showing you what happened and where it happened. That's the only difference of me talking to you guys now.
So everything Janie talks about in relation to where she was at, where the children were at, where Malaya was at, is all that location in the driveway. And she says here, I'm showing you what happened and where it happened. First of all, Janie's entire focus is the driveway. So she's saying it happened in the driveway. But not only that, she's saying where it happened. She's talking about a single event. She's not talking about the children wandering off. She's talking about something happened happening in this location at this time. This is where it happened. A moment in time. I can see merit in the hypothermia theory, but at the same time, there is so many things that point towards something having occurred in the driveway.
Thursday when I opened up the door, Jack and Lily were right beside the playhouse looking for worms under a board. Jack said to me, "Look, Granny, I found a worm, I found a centipede." I said, "Good boy, you keep looking." That's when I went over in my front of my RV and started raking the gravel for the swimming pool. Because I was waiting for Daniel to find his tools so he could help me put the top board up on the fence so I could put the boards up because I couldn't hold one end and nail the other end. Anybody that knows that, anybody that does carpentry knows that that's impossible to do. To get it balanced and hold one end up and the other end drop. After Daniel helped me, I continue putting the boards on the fence. But there was another fence on the other side that was there before that. So I was out there doing my fence. Jack and Lily were in the backyard playing. I came in the house to have some supper. I do not know when the kids went in the house. I don't know what time they went to bed. I don't know anything of that.
Now, this to me is a fairly important statement from Janie. First of all, she establishes that she came out and the children were out there playing in the same location, of course. And then she goes to rake her driveway for a while because she's waiting on Daniel, because he needs to find tools so he can stand there and hold a railing up while she hammers it on. Go figure that out. She's said specifically here, his role was to hold the rail so she could hammer it on. And yet apparently he needed to go get his tools. Now what Janie establishes here is that Daniel helped her and then he just kind of evaporated. We don't know where he went after that, because then she continued working on the fence and the children were playing in the backyard. And then she went in for supper and she's got no idea when the children went inside or when they went to bed. And I've said this before, she doesn't need to offer up when the children went to bed because there's no reason why she would know when the children went to bed. It's totally redundant. It's information that nobody would expect her to offer up. And yet she's offering it up like it is significant. To me, that suggests that the children never went inside. But the big question as well is, where did Daniel go? And I'll cover that here rather than after all Janie's audio. What we know from Daniel, according to what he said on that Turkey show, and I've played this only recently, so I'm not going to go through the audio with you, but essentially, according to Daniel, he was out there helping Janie with the fence until just when it was starting to get dark. And then he went inside when it got dark. So there's this gap in time anyway between when it's starting to get dark and when it was actually dark. He stopped helping Janie when it was starting to get dark, but he didn't go inside till it was actually dark. But he doesn't tell us what he was doing in the meantime. But you have Janie here saying that he just helped her by holding this pole, and then she continued fencing. So apparently she was still fencing in the dark while Lily and Jack were still outside playing in the dark, in the cold. Something doesn't add up there. And then you have Daniel claiming that when he went inside, he thinks the children were in bed. He's not sure, but he thinks the children were in bed. He can't remember them being up late. And he mentions Malaya's 2 different times. But he doesn't recall the children being up late. So he's got no recollection of anything to do with the children on Thursday night. But see, if he went in after he finished Janie helping with the fence, Janie was out there longer and the children were allegedly out there longer. So when he went in, the children should have still been outside. So he would have known that they weren't in bed. But apparently he thinks they were in bed. So this is where everything starts to unravel. And you'll note that his narrative doesn't intersect with Malaya's either. Because you don't hear him talking about Malaya putting the children to bed. You don't even hear him talking about interacting with Malaya. All he talks about is coming inside and, the children, he thinks they were in bed. But he doesn't offer up any information, any other information. He doesn't have any conversation with Malaya, none of that stuff, until he claims that he turned the light on for the children at a little bit after midnight, which is totally illogical. Now, this is stuff that I really delve into in another video, one that I did a few days ago. So this is one that I will link in the description rather than going on about it here. Because I know a lot of you watch all my videos anyway. So really, for those people who've not seen it and don't know what I'm going on about here, probably the best way to really understand what I'm talking about here is to go and watch that video after this one. So the link will be in the description should you wish to go and watch it.
My brother called me at 8:48. We talked for 2 minutes, 59 seconds. After that, I laid down. My dog barked because Lily and Jack were here where the swings are. I have a board up over my window. I did not see them because the board was closed. The reason I have a board up over my window is for the winter time to keep the draft out and for the summertime to keep the sun out. I heard them Friday morning. I swear on a Bible. Better than that, I swear on my father's grave. I heard them Friday morning. So the kids were here Friday morning.
So she's talking about hearing them but not being able to see them. And then she's just going all out with the attempt to convince people that yes, she definitely heard them Friday morning. And she's being overly persuasive. She's going to swear on the Bible. She's going to swear on her father's grave. The only thing missing from this is her trademark, believe me. So the fact that she is trying so hard to persuade her audience that she definitely heard the children on Friday morning is a huge red flag to me. She is being overly persuasive. That is usually one of the first signs that someone is being deceptive.
I dozed off. I heard the dog bark. The kids were outside. I heard the kids. And then after that, I didn't hear nothing. Everything just went completely silent. And I don't know how long after that, I heard Daniel yelling for the kids. I figured he was yelling at the kids to get inside, or Jack was letting my chickens out, which he usually does. He let them out a few times. So I figured Daniel was getting mad at him for that.
So this is the thing that drew me back to the driveway after talking about the possibility of hypothermia. Her talking about everything just went completely silent. She's talking about hearing the kids and then basically everything just went completely silent, meaning it happened in a moment. It happened from she could hear the kids and then all of a sudden there was silence. And then the next part of the narrative is Daniel yelling. And of course she has to then throw in a bit of victim shaming for good measure. Oh, I thought he was yelling because, Jack gets into things and he lets the chickens out.
And I even went and reenact what I think happened. And to tell you the truth, if I was a child that was in a fence and got out of it and was running, yes, I would be excited to go. And those kids are always excited when they're running around because they're always screaming and hollering.
So she has essentially just said that the kids got out of the yard and they were running down the driveway and they were excited. She's like, if I were a kid, I would have been excited. And then she goes, and Lily and Jack, they do get excited like this. She has essentially, the way she has worded it, is her saying this happened. They got out of the driveway, they were running because they were excited. But hey, if I was a kid, I would do that too. So while the narratives from Daniel and Malaya and some of Janie's narratives basically have the children essentially in the yard and then they just vanish, Janie has added in additional information. They got out of the yard and then they were running down the driveway. And the way she said it, like I said, makes it sound like she is basically saying this happened.
As the dog barked when he heard them outside, and then it went completely silent, and my dog never said a word never barked after that until he heard Daniel yelling for Lily and Jack.
Every time I hear her say that, it gives me chills. She's talking about hearing them outside and the dog's barking, and then it went quiet and he never said a word. And then she corrects herself, he never barked after that. And then she goes, until Daniel was yelling. But he never said a word, never barked after that. It has that finality. Never. It's an absolute. Never said anything again. That is pointing at the children being deceased. When someone never says anything again, then something catastrophic has happened to prevent them from ever being able to speak again. And I think the fact that she slipped up and never said a word, I think that is major leakage. And then when she tried to correct it, she still went with the never barked. So she got rattled. She tried to fix her mistake, but the leakage is still there. She's still showing that absolute finality. Something occurred that you could not come back from. It really does make it sound like this sudden silence from the children was because of a single event that ended their lives.
If the kids were out in the yard by themselves, let's just say, and they get out of the gate and were running up the driveway, I would know, or I would think the kids would be saying, especially Lily. Come on, Jackie, let's go, Jackie. Because that's all she ever did was say that. Even up in the woods with my other 2 grandchildren, if Jack is sitting there looking for bugs, Lily's usually saying, come on, Jackie, let's go. So that's another thing I can't understand is if I never heard the kids running. If the kids were running out of the yard, out of the fence, my dog would have still been barking. As I said, because of Lily's loud scream and hollering. So, as I said, I heard the kids out here in the yard by the swings. And then I heard completely silence.
Again, she's establishing that she could hear them and then it was completely silent. She is pointing towards a single catastrophic event, something that happened in an instant. And she's saying, I didn't hear them running down the driveway. But the way she's wording it makes it sound like they definitely did go running down the driveway. It's just that she didn't hear that. Or at least she claims to have not heard it. My issue there is that she seems pretty clear on this notion of them running down the driveway. She seems pretty clear on this idea of if they got in the driveway, they'd be excited. I suspect that what she's trying to do here is essentially separate herself from what happened. I had no idea this happened because I didn't even hear them. I didn't see them go out into the driveway. I didn't hear them go out into the driveway. So I have no responsibility for what happened. Because the way she talks about the sudden silence and the never saying a word again certainly points towards the sudden silence being a direct result of some catastrophic incident. Meaning that she is also, when she's establishing that they ran into the driveway, they couldn't have done it quietly. Because that wouldn't be a catastrophic incident. So it seems to me that what she is telling us here is that she was aware of them getting into the driveway, running along the driveway, running into the driveway. But she wants us to think that she was unaware of it. There was a board on the window and she heard them out in the yard, but, you know, yeah, they get excited and they ran into the driveway, but she didn't hear any of that. But then while they were running down the driveway, all of a sudden there was this sudden silence. When you unpack everything she said, that is essentially what she is telling us. Again, I've done more of a deep dive on this in previous videos. They will be linked in the description if you wanted to go and watch them.
But I'm just saying, in my opinion, why didn't I hear the kids longer if they get out of the fence and start running up the driveway or leaving the driveway?
So this is where she's trying to sell the story of someone must have taken them. But she's kind of falling flat here because she's saying, why didn't I hear them for longer? So she's actually establishing that they were running in the driveway, but claiming that, hey, I didn't hear them the whole time they were running in the driveway. Why didn't I hear them the whole time they were running in the driveway? Because I really should have heard them. Which doesn't fit with the sudden silence. So I think she is distancing herself from whatever occurred. I blame myself. I still believe that whatever happened, she talks about them being outside unsupervised. Well, she talks about going in for supper. We had no idea where Daniel was because he just evaporated after he helped fixing the fence with her. So she's saying the children were outside unsupervised. They got into the driveway. And we hear her talking about how she blames herself because she wasn't watching them. Is that the time when you went in for supper and the kids were still left outside with nobody supervising them? The time when they ran out into the driveway, perhaps?
And the kids were out in the yard. Now you can see there's 2 swings where the kids play. My bedroom is right there. I heard the kids. This is where the kids' swings are. This is where they always played.
And so that's where...
That's where I heard them. And I can hear everything in that trailer. If 2 kids get out of a fence, and Jack and Lily are all the time yelling, especially Lily, come on, Jackie, let's go, Jackie, let's go, Jackie. It's all I hear out here. When the kids get out of the fence and come out through here, I would have heard them yelling, come on, Jackie, let's go, Jackie, let's go. I didn't hear anything.
So remember she said that in this interview, she showed them exactly what happened. She's saying they were playing here. And then she's trying to pose it as if they got out of the fence, they would have been noisy. But you know what? I didn't hear anything. But we've heard in all the other interviews, we can see from her body language, she is signalling, yes, they got out of the fence. I'm going to tell you that I didn't hear anything though. I mean, she's showing you with her body language that the children got out of the fence and were in the driveway. How much clearer can you be? And I get why she has to establish that she didn't hear them go into the driveway. Because if something did happen to those children in the driveway, she is in a position where she should have been able to see it. She should have been aware that the children were in the driveway. So she wouldn't want to admit that she heard them running out into the driveway, because that would be admitting that she didn't go out and watch them. She wasn't there when they were doing something wrong. Well, that sounds a bit like, I blame myself because normally I would be watching them.
There was a bench sitting here, or a sawhorse, it's over there, was sitting here. I was sitting on it, bawling my eyes out. I was crying because I blame myself for not getting up that morning to see the kids. Because if I would have got up, this wouldn't have never happened. Okay?
Now, while we know that the tears were over an altercation with Officer Mason, quite often that sort of thing is usually just a trigger from something that's come beforehand. So maybe there is some truth in this. I think she certainly appears to get a little bit emotional here when she's saying, if I'd have gotten up, none of this would have happened. She's saying she heard the kids. She should have gone outside. Now, why would you say that? Why would you say you blame yourself because you heard the kids and you didn't go outside and supervise them when their mother is in the house? Unless you happen to be outside, say, working on a fence, and you were aware that the children were outside unsupervised, and you went inside to get yourself some supper and you didn't tell anyone that you had gone inside and that the children were therefore no longer supervised. You would feel guilty if something happened to them then. And honestly, we know Janie really had very little love for those children. So if she had been working on a fence for a few hours and she goes inside to get some supper and she can hear the children running out into the driveway, I could imagine Janie going, I'm just going to let it go because I've come inside and I'm hungry and I'm going to eat. So yes, I do believe that the emotional reaction was triggered by the run-in with Officer Mason because she didn't want them going into her RV. But maybe there is that element of truth, that was just the catalyst, the thing that tipped her into that emotional response.
Right here in this area here. I plan on putting a pool up this year for the kids. You need level ground for a pool. That's what I was doing. I was leveling out the ground to set up a pool.
And this is the Thursday.
This is Thursday.
Right.
Friday, all the investigators, search and rescue and everything. Right around here was where they found the only footprint.
This is where the boot.
This is where I was raking that night. That's where the boot print was found, in the mud where I was raking.
So I didn't play the bit before that where she's talking about Malaya in the driveway, and this is where I was raking. But you heard Ali clarifying, and this was the Thursday. And then Janie skips ahead to the Friday and then finding the boot print. So you have the tangled narrative, you have everything happening in the same location. And the confusion over whether she's talking about Thursday night or Friday morning. There's something else that I have never noticed before. Now, ages and ages back, pretty much the first time I saw this interview, when I covered it on my channel, I pointed out the can in the background, the pile of rocks in the background on the side of the driveway there. Because in many cultures, that is used to symbolise a location where someone has passed. Has a lot of other meanings, but many, many cultures use it to mark a location where someone has passed. So this is something that I pointed out when I was covering this interview for the very first time. But it's something that's always drawn my attention at this point in the interview. So I actually hadn't paid close attention to what Janie was doing at the time. So I'm going to replay part of that clip for you. And just watch Janie closely while she is talking about what was going on.
Right around here was where they found the only footprint.
This is where the boot.
This is where I was raking that night.
So she's talking about the boot print, and Ali clarifies, and this is where you were raking. And Janie goes, and this is where, as she turns around and looks at the can and nods her head at the can. She's indicating the can and says, where I was raking that night. Watch it again, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. I will play it at normal speed and then I will slow it down for you so you can see.
Right around here was where they found the only footprint.
This is where the boot.
This is where I was raking that night.
This is where the boot.
This is where I was raking that night.
Her non-verbal language there, her body language, has basically said, this is where this thing occurred, the reason that this can is here. Now, I've said this before. When Belinda was there, that pile of rocks wasn't there. That was put there afterwards. And Janie is basically, she's talking about the Thursday night, she's talking about the boot print, and she's saying this is where, and she's indicating the can And then she goes up back to her narrative. It really does seem like she is pointing to the location where something occurred. And it just happens to be that she is pointing directly at this can. And you probably noticed also that straight after that, it knocked her off balance a bit. It took the wind out of her for a moment and she lost her balance momentarily. Okay, so there's one clip here that is a follow-on directly from this. So I'll play this first.
I'm not here to lie. The reason why I wanted you guys to come here and do the interview here is to show you exactly where everything took place. And to show people that this is what happened.
So again, Janie is saying, I did this to show where everything took place. And yet the main focus has been the driveway. Not only has the main focus been the driveway, but you saw her indicating the location of that can.
That my kid did not have nothing to do with this, and I had nothing to do with this.
Okay, there is some serious emotional stuff happening right there. That is someone who is traumatised by something. That is someone who is afraid. Someone who is anxious. Someone who is upset. That is the look of someone who has experienced something that haunts them. She's not showing anger here over accusations being made against Daniel. She is showing anguish, trauma. Something has really, really disturbed and upset her. Something has traumatised her. And this is while she is talking about Daniel not having done anything to those children. Okay, just a quick recap before I wrap it all up. So you have Malaya giving different accounts for the Thursday night. They were watching a TV show and then she put them to bed probably around 9. But really vague, not a lot of detail. And in fact, in this instance, she hasn't even fed them. Then we have her talking about Daniel. He stayed up and was going to clean the house. But she doesn't know what he did. And she doesn't know when he came to bed because she wasn't woken up through the night. So this makes it sound that she's had some sort of conversation with Daniel before she went to bed at 9 o'clock. So you have a brief intersection of her and Daniel in the timeline. But when she's talking about the kids watching a TV show and her putting him to bed, putting Meadow to bed, Daniel doesn't factor in at all there. The second retelling, she remembered to feed them this time round. She got them something to eat and they were watching TV. And they might have gone outside, but they came in when it was getting dark. All very vague. They might have gone outside. Yeah, they came in when it was getting dark. And then all the details about wearing the clothes, and she got them to bed around 10 p.m. So apparently it took an hour and a half to get their teeth brushed and stuff, because it would have been getting dark around 8:30. Daniel doesn't factor into this retelling at all this time round. Now, we have this confused account from Daniel where he doesn't even know what day is what. So he thinks that he went to bed fairly early that night and didn't wake up till it was light the next morning, which is not accurate. And what is bizarre is that it wouldn't fit for Wednesday night either, because they got home late on Wednesday. So where does this come from? Daniel's got no idea what was going on Thursday night by the looks of it. Or at least, if he has, It's not a story that he wants to tell. And then we get this odd statement after a bunch of redactions where it says, Daniel says he always takes his phone when he leaves the house and his timeline will say he was home. Okay, so you're basically saying, well, my phone was here. Now, we know this is not referring to when he went out searching on Friday, allegedly, because he claims he left his phone home then. So, and I said this the other day, I wonder if this is referring to Thursday night. He's saying, of course I was home, you can tell, because my phone will show you that. Or maybe the early hours of Friday morning. But it is an interesting statement. Now, Janie's interview that she didn't mention any of the hearing the children, raking the driveway, doing the fence, any of that stuff. There's none of that stuff in her interview with the RCMP. What is interesting, and I know what she means here, but the way it's worded, if this is how she said it, this is leakage. So I think that this is meant to be referring to her story of going up in the woods, searching, reaching the road at the top and running into Daniel. But the wording concerns me because it makes me wonder if it's leakage. Janie was concerned about the timeline because there was no way the kids could have walked from the yard up to the road where Daniel was in the vehicle without her seeing them. Again, this is the, I didn't hear them. Everything suddenly went quiet. They were playing in the yard. Normally I would hear them if they ran into the driveway because they get excited. But you know what? I was completely oblivious to the fact. Now, there's also this brief moment from one of the news reports where you see Earl with Justin, presumably, heading towards the house. The media are recording them because the detectives are there to talk to the family again about calling off the search or at least scaling it back. But what you see is as they walk past Daniel's car, Earl looks down at presumably the wheel arch, and he points something out to Justin. And then having done so, he glances behind him. He does a guilty look behind him to check and see if anyone saw what he just pointed out. And this, of course, is the vanished vehicle. This is Daniel's Subaru that is gone. Maybe it's at Earl's place. Maybe it was in Kent's garage when his garage went up in flames. But this car is just gone. No longer around. No explanation, it's just gone. Now, having just shown you that in terms of Janie's narrative, everything seems to point to the driveway. Not only that, but everything seems to get tangled up in terms of her timeline so that you don't know whether she's talking about Thursday afternoon or Friday morning or when. Seems like all the action occurs in the one spot and the timeline just gets all tangled up in terms of whether or not it's Thursday or Friday. And you also have the major inconsistencies. None of their statements match. Seems like Janie, Malaya and Daniel were all in complete different realities on the Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening. Daniel didn't intersect with the children at all, except for apparently turning the light on for them at midnight. Daniel evaporated after helping Janie with the fence. Although he apparently at some point in time told Malaya he was going to do the housework. But he never did, and she doesn't know what he did. She doesn't even know when he came to bed, because she slept through the entire night. She wasn't woken by anything. So none of their timelines connect at all, which is a huge red flag. To me, it says that, yes, something must have happened on the Thursday evening, late afternoon, evening. So, with that in mind, bearing in mind that Janie has placed all the action in the driveway, bearing in mind that we really don't know where Daniel was or what he was doing, and there is perhaps a possibility that he left the property at some time on Thursday, because he claims that, well, my phone will show you that I was there the whole time. Bearing in mind that there is no consistent accounts of the children after Thursday afternoon, I'm going to play you one more bit of audio.
One thing that I'm sure, and I said 1,000% before, is those children were alive on May the 2nd around 8:45 in the morning on May the 2nd. And I said that right from the start, and that's what started me investigating. Okay, if they were alive around that time of the morning on May the 2nd, well, Daniel certainly never killed them between then and the last day, Monday, before they went to school. And the only way he could have killed them was right in front of his mother and his woman and his baby in the driveway. I know they were alive that morning in Lansdowne, and unless Daniel killed them right in front of his mother and his woman and Meadow, he never killed them, and I believe they're still alive.
So he does the same as Janie in terms of pushing really hard with, I know that they were still alive at this exact time on the Friday morning. And what, because you were there and you saw them, dingbat? You can't know that unless you were there. But the thing that is so disturbing, and he says it on 2 separate occasions, is that, well, they had to have been, unless Daniel caused them to no longer be alive in the driveway in front of Janie, Malaya and Meadow. Well, it seems like we have all these accounts that point towards something occurring in the driveway. And you have Janie talking about Malaya standing on the edge of the driveway with Meadow and her being like in a state of shock. But you also have this account of Malaya on the edge of the driveway in tears. You have Janie giving this account of the children running into the driveway. And she knows nothing. She didn't hear anything. She didn't see anything. But all of a sudden everything went silent. And then Daniel was yelling. And you have Derwood basically placing the action in the driveway. That is a very, very specific statement. Well, unless Daniel caused something to happen in the driveway in front of Janie and Malaya and Meadow, then it's not possible that they could no longer be alive. That is, to me, that is mind-blowing. It makes it sound to me like he knows exactly what happened. And that he's made it his role to step in and cover Daniel's ass. He's making up this narrative about the children being on the reserve because he knows exactly what happened. He knows exactly what Daniel did, and he is covering for him. I am very much looking forward to reading your comments about what you think in terms of this. Has Derwood produced the smoking gun here? Has he just basically thrown Daniel in it completely? So let me know your thoughts, because I'm very curious to know your take on this. So thanks for listening. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit that like button. Help me get this out there into the algorithm and seen by more people. So on that note, thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.